got City Slickers in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't even remember the movie that much. I remember the plot line.
So, to everyone listening, hi. We're going to start you off with a little bit of cinema history, City Slickers. Dr. Steve and I were just talking about it because I recently rewatched it. The premise is Billy Crystal gets sent by his wife on this trip. She tells him he has to go because he's being really, like, I don't know what's the right word, not dystopian, but he's very unhappy, very jaded. So he gets to the Dude Ranch, and then through a series of errors, they end up being responsible for doing this cattle run.
Cattle drive.
Cattle drive. Yep, they have to bring a bunch of cattle across a state. A lot of zany, wild things happen, and well, I won't spoil it. It's a great film. They made a second one.
Not so good.
I haven't rewatched the second one. I'm sure it's not as good. Curly was the name of the old guy.
Jack Palance.
Yeah, that was his character, was Curly. The guy from Home Alone. Not Marv. Which one's Marv? The
Tall guy.
Tall guy. Okay, then that is the guy. Also, Haley informed me I do this thing. I figured out what the thing with my voice is. Remember I talked about this? It's whenever I try to burp and keep quiet about it and talk through my burp.
Okay.
I just did it. She's going to be like, she really hates it. She was texting me the other day timestamps of when I did it.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, she's like, you need to stop doing this.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just did it again. Sorry, Haley. Well, how are you, Dr. Steve?
I'm doing good.
I don't know what that was. That just was a weird gargle kind of thing. We had a really interesting chat last session about kind of, I guess, the patient-therapist relationship and this notion of like sharing. And I did appreciate what you said, and I am going to do a better job of being honest about how I'm feeling. If I feel the need to push back, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might just articulate it as like, hey, so this is how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, I've been super busy. That was our last session was our 20th session, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that, which
That's a lot.
it is. I feel like I'm going to take a guess here, but I bet that's more than you thought you would do.
Yep.
Yeah. That's why I wanted to bring it up. But
That's more than I typically see people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I said that to you when we
You
were
did,
when we
but
were
I'm
dating.
curious, like
just
what's
when
the
we were
longest?
when we were dating, right? That's about what I told you.
I don't understand.
Well, when you were like pitching
Oh,
the
yeah,
idea of
yeah,
this
yeah.
podcast,
Okay.
I mean, I was like, I typically don't work with individuals. I typically don't see people.
You call it dating. It was a phone call. We dated for one phone call.
Speed dating.
Yeah, exactly. What's like,
The longest?
I'm curious what's on the longer end. I mean, obviously 20, but.
No, I don't even know if I've had some people that have come to consult with me for, several years running, but it's not a weekly kind of a thing. So maybe meet a month and then go a couple months and then check in again. And
you keep using the term discernment counseling.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Discernment.
Okay. You ready for an advertisement?
Yeah.
It's a specific protocol that we developed at the University of Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically for individuals, married or coupled, partnered individuals who are wondering whether they should stay in their relationship or not.
Got it.
The big difference between traditional couples counseling and this discernment counseling is that the goal of couples therapy is to help people bond and connect, get more intimate, help the relationship. That's hard to do when one person is thinking they don't want to be in the relationship, but they're not sure they want to get out of it either. So we developed a protocol that's more designed around helping couples get greater clarity and confidence in their decision-making.
Discernment. I was wondering where that word, like where it came from or how it played a role. So it's the idea, the goal of the work is to clarity.
Is to make a decision about, are we going to work on it? And if we are, what will the work consist of? Are we going to leave our relationship?
Wow.
And how are we going to leave it? How do we navigate those waters.
So a potential outcome that's I guess acceptable, or like an outcome is to make the decision, hey, we're done.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily to make sure that we stay together. It's to just come to a...
Exactly.
So then is it like, okay, you do discernment counseling, and then if you decide you know what you need to work on, then you might go see traditional couples therapist to follow through on that?
Exactly. Yeah, in the process of like discernment counseling is itself kind of a brief modality, anywhere from 1 to 5 sessions. So people who start it usually get done within a month and a half, 2 months. There's no rule that says people would do all 5 sessions. Some people discern the path that they want to go on within 2 or 3 sessions, and so then once the discerning is done, they're done with discernment counseling, and they might transition to another kind of service, divorce mediation or working on the relationship. Like we specifically outline, one of the paths we outline is to take divorce off the table for a period of 6 months and really work on your relationship after having identified things that each person would want to try and change in themselves. And these are typically things that people would need to change regardless of whether they stay married or not. Like if I keep showing up defensively, or if alcohol is a problem, that's not just related to my relationship. That's just me, right?
Yeah.
I might need to change I might need to change how I'm dealing with alcohol, or deal differently with how I'm showing up as a defensive person, those kinds of things.
And so when you're does the discernment protocol have a specific way, does it have, I'm trying to think of the right, an approach where it's like, okay, traditional couples counseling, we talk about these things. In discernment counseling, we talk about these things.
Yeah, we've outlined an approach. We wrote a textbook on it.
Okay.
Yeah, so
it's truly a protocol where it's like, okay, we do this and we do this.
Yeah, and we look at it one of the examples we give is, if you thought you had cancer, you'd go to an oncologist and they would poke and they'd prod and they'd biopsy and CAT scans and blood work, and none of that is the treatment. None of that's chemotherapy, none of that's radiation. It's just trying to figure out what
is wrong.
What do we got here, and how do we need to deal with it. If you still, with that oncologist, would say, let's proceed with the chemo, or I don't want to get any treatment right now.
So have you experienced or have you seen solutions that occurred during discernment, or at the end of discernment people are like, oh, we're good, we're happy, we're fixed? Or is it usually, okay, we understand, now comes the work?
Usually it's not we're happy, we're fixed. It's it can either be like we see what the kind of work that we need to do to get to a healthier place, and then decision tree, do we do that work or do we not do that work?
Wow.
Or it's not going to work out, and one of us wants to leave the relationship. Usually it's just one person that wants to leave the relationship more than the other. Sometimes the other person comes around and goes, I get it. She's not going to, she's not into me.
Yeah.
And it's better if we break up. And sometimes it's people saying, we got some things from this discernment process. I learned some things about myself. I'm not ready to make all the changes, but I've shifted somewhat, or I see my partner in a different way, and they just kind of modify a little bit of how they're interacting, and that's maybe enough to get them through another year or two, or so.
It would be challenging to be in a position where you had to maintain objectivity in terms of what the final outcome is. I would just assume if I saw 2 people and they're on the brink, the goal, I would be like, well, I want you to figure it out and be happy together, as opposed to okay, it sounds like we're cool with ending this relationship. That would be foreign.
Yeah, it's a bit of a...
Because that's sad. It would be considered a sad moment, maybe.
It could be. It could also be a really relieving moment for someone who's in a relationship that's not been very fulfilling, or they haven't. Yeah. So, reminding when I learned the approach and adopting the approach was really getting my head around the idea. This is about helping them get clarity and confidence in their decision making about the future of their marriage or their relationship, and focus on that. Otherwise, you're trying to get 2 people bonded, and when one of them is not ready to be bonded, that's frustrating. It's like your wheels spinning in therapy.
Takes 2 to tango, as they say in the discernment world.
Now, we've never said that.
Well, you can. That one's free.
I have said, the Dr. Phil line, it takes 2 dogs to burn,
That's a Dr. Phil thing?
That's a Dr. Phil.
It's my understanding that Dr. Phil is not necessarily a doctor. Is he a doctor?
I don't know. I think I understand that he is.
Okay.
I don't know if he's licensed as a mental health practitioner anymore. I think he has been.
Takes 2 logs
but I think he's a entertainer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean.
But he probably has some basis for making his folksy observations.
Yeah. Well, discernment, seeking clarity. Yeah, I could see it being a relief for people who are like, oh, okay, we figured it out. We're not meant to be together. But also, too, I couldn't help but feel like, well, that's kind of sad. But it's good. Clarity is good. It's good to have clarity.
Yeah, right.
That's a perfect segue because I have begun to seek clarity, even though the last time we talked about dissociation, you kind of were like, I don't know, Alex, you seem, I think this might be all in your head kind of a thing, which I'm not saying I agree with you, but I thought about it. Anyway, long story short, I went to, I'm just seeing someone for EMDR. I'm starting that.
Okay.
Had my first little...
This is another podcast?
My EMDR and I don't know how you would do that. Yeah. I told her about this podcast, and you know what she did? She went, oh, and that was it. Didn't ask any questions. She just paused, widened her eyes, and was like, oh, which I thought that was funny. But she was very high on it in the sense of it produces results, and it's been...
She's high on the podcast or high on EMDR?
I wish both, but unfortunately just EMDR.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, and she showed me how it works, and I was telling George this, but a part of me was she was using all these...
The lights?
Fancy words and research, and I was like, you gave me 2 things that buzz, and you show me a light. Those 2 things do not... It's just way too scientific. It's dual lobe reassociation. It's you mean the buzzies. Just call them the buzzies. We can call it a day. With that said, and yeah, we're going to go down that road and just...
So have you actually done some of the EMDR yet?
No. We got to do a couple of intake sessions. But I think what I found encouraging, or what I'm excited about, is she was like, we're going to focus exclusively on years 0 to 12 for you. And the reason that I was excited about that is because I feel like a lot of, we talked a couple sessions ago about this idea of the things that we kind of carry with us, right? Things that occurred, maybe they were a blip on our radar, but they were still on our radar. No one else can see them.
Yeah.
But we know they were there. When I think about that time in my life where I was having lots of panic attacks and I was feeling very, very isolated, there's something that's comforting about the idea that I'm going to revisit that and spend some time thinking about that time, because I feel like I sort of survived it, got through it, and just left those bags are still packed, kind of sitting in my closet. I've just gotten comfortable with knowing that they're there. The reason I bring this up, though, is because another part of me is is this just the mastery talking? That idea of, well, I'm going to figure it out. Yeah, I'm excited.
Lock it down. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So, yeah, we had our first session, and she outlined the process. We're going to have to do a couple more. She wants to get to know stuff about me and my childhood and blah, blah, blah. But then I'll get the treatment.
Yeah, so you were excited to find out that it's going to be kind of limited to a span of years in your life.
Yeah, which I don't know if that sounds interesting or weird, or not weird, but yeah, it's a part of time that I think still carries a lot of hurt, but I don't talk about.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for, or I haven't in a very long time, and I'm looking forward to, at the very least, thinking about it, because apparently with EMDR you don't do a ton of talking. Does this strike? Are you super familiar with it? She was like, "Hey,
she's going to ask questions, and there'll be prompts, and think about this, now think about that, and now now look over, like now follow the light, and now talk about it, and now, I mean, I don't do it, but I've seen it done, and I'm kind of familiar with it. So it'll be interesting to me to see how you think. Like, are you going to become a convert? Like, wow, this stuff is great.
I know.
Or are you going to be a skeptic?
Yep.
Or
I'm currently half skeptic.
Yeah.
Just because.
Skepvert. Not a convert yet.
Yes,
but a
skepvert.
Skepvert.
I'm open.
Yeah.
I'm always open. And like, I don't think conversation or me thinking about something is going to be bad. Although maybe it is. Maybe. Again, I keep thinking about how when we talk about stuff and it's like, what if acceptance, is the way forward? Can you be okay with this version of yourself that you are, as opposed to looking at it like, oh, I might fix it. I might fix it. I might fix it. And
that sounds like one of the pillars of what you've gotten out of our work together. That very question is
mastery has been
mastery or acceptance. What? Where do I land with that?
It has been very. It's good. It's been good for me to hear this idea of acceptance, because as I've mentioned to you, sometimes I feel like acceptance is synonymous for giving up. We've talked about this, and talking about ambiguous loss has sort of helped me realize that while there is a path where you can go down, mastery is a path, there is another path of, and who's to say acceptance, who's to say which one is right and which one is wrong. It's totally subjective or relative to how you want to live your life. And so that is something I have taken away from our work. With that said, I have 35 years of mastery ingrained. That's going to be a hard habit to kick. So yeah. The other thing I wanted to bring up too was after you and I talked about dissociation a couple sessions ago, and I mean, you had mentioned like you seem present to me, and I hear you talk about dissociation. I don't get that impression that you're somewhere else. For whatever reason, later that day, I was watching Band of Brothers, which is my favorite show. I rewatch it every couple of years. So I don't know if it was Band of Brothers or if it was our work together or a little bit of both, but I just randomly just started crying. I was thinking about this idea that maybe I am fine, maybe I am okay, and I've been okay this whole time.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, the thought of that just made me start crying for probably literally 5 seconds, and then it was completely gone. It just came, and then it was like just
fleeting.
Yeah. Yep. And then to the point where I was like, "It did it? Is it? Is there no? Is it? Could I cry more?" And I tried. I was like, "Nope, it's gone." The moment was gone. But it was very fascinating.
So how did you understand that moment? How did you make sense of that moment?
Well, I thought that there was something there. Obviously, I knew. It's like if you look at like oil wells, like I'd struck oil, emotional oil.
Yeah.
So there was something there, and then it was gone.
And capped it. Or did you drain the well, or did you cap the well?
I think, unfortunately, I've developed this practice of like, not repression, but it's like, okay, leave, those feelings exist in spite of them. Don't, like maybe it is repression, but the result is now if I do feel a really strong emotion of sadness, like I can't, it's really hard, George. It's like, you should just cry one day. Cry for like 15 minutes. And I can't. I couldn't. If I were to cry, it's like, I think the most I can go is like 8 seconds.
I don't know anybody who can cry on demand like that.
He just meant if you feel it. Like there are times where it's like, I feel sadness.
Yeah.
But it's just gone. And that fascinates me, how it's so quick to come and go, as opposed to just being able to sit with it. Because I feel like there's a lot of stuff there, and I just need to get it out. And that's what I make of that moment on the couch. It was like, oh, there's something here. It wants to get out. Let it out. Maybe it was just a tiny little thing. I don't know. But it happened. Band of Brothers does have that effect on me, though. I don't want to give you too much credit.
No, not at all. You can get what I give. You can get on Netflix, I think,
or on podcasts.
perhaps.
Specifically this one. But there was,
but the thoughts that you were having were about, like, what if I'm okay?
Yeah. What if this, in the moment, I swear my brain was for a couple of seconds being like, do I feel normal? Do I feel like I did when I was 12? And I think that sort of was emotional for me, to be like, wait a minute, like, what if?
So yeah, like, Alex, what if you've wasted all this time thinking you were less than normal? What if you spent all this time searching for something when the reality is you're okay?
That would be.
And you have thoughts sometimes, and you
had
as a child, you had deep thoughts that you didn't, for whatever reason, you didn't feel like you could bring them up.
Yep.
And then because there was the prohibition to bring them up, there was no place for them to go except rattle around in your head and circle back to them and think about it more. And you didn't have somewhere to go and say, is this...
And then be done with it.
Anybody else think about this when the TV turns off?
Yep.
You see that? Is that my life going to be snuffed out like a tube? TV tube?
It kind of reminds me of what George had told me. It was like, or was it you?
Well, hang on. Was it smart? If it was smart, it's probably me.
Whoever wants to take credit for this can, but it's this idea of like, if you hurt your ankle and you were like, okay, my ankle's hurt, move on. Life still exists. I'm not going to think about it too much. Versus you hurt your ankle and you just think about your ankle all the time. And you start to be like, oh, well, now the left side of my ankle hurts. I got to move more weight into my right foot. And it just starts to impact the way that you walk. And then it starts to impact the way that you...
It gets more power.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah.
In your life. We talked about that in here.
Did we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I told George about it.
And there's a record somewhere. You can probably go listen to all the podcasts.
Yes. There definitely is a record. But that is what it makes me think of.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if it was just on this loop versus if when I was 12, I could have said this, and someone could have been like, oh, hey, that's wild that you're experiencing this. This sounds really intense, but you're okay. There's nothing wrong with you. If you want, we can talk to people about it. You know,
right.
Maybe then I would have been like, okay. But what I keep coming back to is the feeling. And I can't, it's so hard for me to articulate. And
yeah,
I just felt different, and I still feel different. But
the interesting thing with you, Alex, is that there's a lot of people in the world who I would say spend a lot of time trying to convince themselves that they're quote unquote normal, healthy, and you're the opposite. You're the opposite. Like, there's got to be something wrong here. There's something missing, and so it's hard. So like for those other people who spend a lot of their time convinced that they're quote unquote normal, don't have any problem, sometimes it's hard for those people to go, oh, I am showing up it's hard for them to get to that place, some level of recognition. And it's almost like you're having a similar but opposite reaction, right?
It's
like
hard for me to think that I'm,
that I'm okay.
Yeah.
That maybe there are a lot of people who struggle with the same things I do, and they just don't think about their ankle anymore. You know, they don't focus on those things. They focus on the other things that they have more control over.
Yes. Yeah, I would be a little embarrassed. I'd feel embarrassed about that.
Like to find out for sure that I've been spending all my time thinking I was dysfunctional or something about less than, like, or
hey, you've been fine this whole. You know what it reminds me of? This like, oh, this person was at a party and they thought they were drinking alcohol and they were acting all wild and loose, and it's like, no, that was non-alcoholic punch, and they're just like, oh, that's a little bit how I would feel.
Yeah, a little placebo effect there.
Yeah, it's like, right? Oh, so I'm just an idiot. They're like, so I'm just
a jackass.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just really naive. That's how I would feel. And I don't want to feel that way.
So it's, so the last time we talked about, I had listened to the one podcast where I wasn't involved in.
Yeah.
And I raised the idea of like, hey, if you get mad at me, you can say that in here. And we had some conversation about that. But I can imagine if your way of looking at yourself includes some kind of value or some kind of like if that's part of your identity, like the guy who's got dissociation, the guy whose life changed when he was an adolescent, and irreversible, and a part of me is missing. If I didn't support you in that thought, if it's something I said, I could see you getting pissed off.
Yes.
Like, wait a second, I've spent a good 20 years convincing myself that I have this thing that very few people have, that there's no treatment for. And
you're going to march in here.
Yeah, and you're going to spit in my soup. That was a psychological term, but you're going to ruin it for me. Like, screw you.
Yeah. Are you asking me if I've felt that way?
No, I'm just thinking that I could see why you might get mad at me if I put together another idea about your life
and that would be accurate.
That has had less airtime in your world.
Because I think a part of me is like, hey, this is real for me, and whether or not it is true, it has had an effect on me.
Yeah,
and it has caused me, for me personally. So this is an objective darkness and isolation, but some of the darkest moments of my life are associated with this. And anytime if I were to be met with like, oh, it's all in your head. It's like, dude, you don't know what I have been through with this stuff. And that also relates to the embarrassment of like, what if it is all in my head and I suffered for what? For what reason? Just because. That would be so weird to unpack.
Yeah, what did I get out of doing that?
Yeah, what was the point?
Yeah.
Was that a way? Did I waste? Yeah, how ironic would it be if like that was all of that was for nothing. Like I just thought I had been missing all of this time when in fact it was there, and I just came up with a way to miss it or something.
Maybe you came up with an explanation, but it may just be that you're a guy who's prone to anxiety. You're prone to worrying about certain things, and this was one of the ways that it manifested itself.
Yeah. And also too, I got no regrets. I got a hockey jersey from North Korea. I got no regrets. And Blake Wheeler.
That's a pretty cool thing to not have regrets in how you've lived,
I know.
A good, 1/3 of your life?
That's what I take. Did I ever, not to totally shift, but remember, did I tell you how Haley says that sometimes us going to couples therapy, it feels like she's attached to a rocket ship and she's a turtle?
Oh, no, that's an appropriate picture, though.
Yeah, that's what that is. She got that for me for Christmas. I wanted to show you that because I thought it was funny. Because like in our sessions together, I'll go off on this like, tangent and she'll be like, "This is all new for me, Alex." So like, can you
Did she
slow
make
down?
that? Did she draw it?
No, Fiverr. Have you heard of Fiverr? It's a website where you can outsource like creative work to people all over the world.
So she just says, "I need a picture of this guy in a rocket ship with a turtle hanging on," and somebody in a sweatshop in
someone in Bangladesh,
North Korea.
No, not in North Korea. They're not on Fiverr, but it's typically the like South Asia, Indonesia area, or Pakistan. But yeah, like graphic design. You can get people to. I found a puppet to do an announcement for one of my music videos. He was a Spanish-speaking puppet, and so I had him announce I had an upcoming music video.
Yeah.
And the reason it's called Fiverr is because everything used to be $5.
Oh.
But now it's, that was 10 years ago.
More than that.
Inflation.
So, Haley's always an interesting entity to me because I've never met her.
She's not allowed to be here.
She doesn't. My sense is that she doesn't talk about your dissociation at all. Like she doesn't.
She didn't know about it until this podcast.
Yeah, my sense is that she did. Right, so she didn't know about it. She was unaware of it. It was
Nobody knew about it really until.
I know, but I'm just saying that, like she's in a relationship
with you
and doesn't notice anything missing.
Correct.
She's not like, this guy's great, but there's this hole.
He seems. I've just talked about this with George because you had mentioned that, right? It was like, I hear you talking about Alex, and I don't get that impression that you're not here. And my rebuttal was like, what if people don't realize how good I've gotten at pretending,
Yeah.
Which is truthfully, like, I don't think people appreciate, like, I definitely have put in a lot of time to seem like I'm here. But I'm not saying that that's the answer, but yeah. Yep. We talked about that very thing, and he was like, yep, it's possible. Because no one has ever been like, hey, you seem...
Not here.
Yeah.
There's parts of you that's missing.
Yep. I mean, it would be... Probably anyone listening is like, yeah, you sound like you're fully present. You're very, very present.
Yeah.
Extremely present. Very self-aware.
Present enough to be the patient and the... and the producer and the director of a podcast.
Yep. Listen, I know you're high on this agenda of Alex is fine, but I don't know what to tell you, Dr. Steve.
I maybe it puts you out of business if you're fine. It's like it messes with your identity. It's like, what the crap? I've spent all this time not being fine. Spent a hell of a lot of money in therapy.
I joke about it. If I were to, I struggle to think about this idea that there's a part of me that's holding myself back from feeling normal because I so desperately want to feel how I thought I felt back when I was 12, right? The moment pre this thing happened. I was so desperate for so long to go back to that, to also entertain this idea that I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
That is so trippy to me.
Yeah. Because
I would love to have this feeling, maybe whether it's a feeling or if it's a voice, to just be gone.
Mm.
Just go, I'd love to wake up one day and just be like,
done with that.
Oh. Yeah. And what did she call it? A compulsive thought? A compulsion? EMDR lady. EMDR. Call her EMDR. She said that EMDR is very helpful with sort of obsessive thoughts. And so we'll see. We'll see what the buzzies do.
Yeah.
I'll know more. I'm going to be gone for a couple of weeks. Going skiing. Haley and I are going to Whistler.
Okay. BC.
Yes. Mm-hmm. To Canada. That's Canada. It's British Columbia.
Those are my people.
Are you Canadian?
Yeah, I am, but not from the West. I'm from Toronto.
Okay.
So.
Oh, you mentioned, do you have a Maple Leafs jersey?
I do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, we're excited to do that, and then I go to Los Angeles afterwards. So I'll be gone next couple of weeks. But so you get a break.
Yeah.
You've earned it.
Well, and then I've got some travel too. We can talk about that off air though.
Okay. Well, maybe I get to do some solo episodes where I just talk trash about you.
That would be good. And I want one too.
Yeah. Right? Finally, no Alex. Oh my God. Okay. Well, Dr. Steve, always a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Yeah. In the meantime, go watch City Slickers.
Yeah, everyone listening, City Slickers, it is definitely on. I watched it. It's either Amazon Prime or Netflix, one of those two. Billy Crystal, Marv from Home Alone, and then Curly.
Jack Palance. Are the three guys?
No, there's more. There's two other. It's Billy Crystal, Marv, and then this other guy who I've never seen in another movie since then.
Huh.
Who's sort of like, he orchestrates the guy's weekend. It's so funny because they talk about being old, and they're all 30. Yeah. It's like they're all younger than me. And I'm like, oh man, oh that's sad. All right. Well, thank you.
All right, we'll see you.
See ya. Take care, everyone. Stay happy.